What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. As you guys can see, I am in a different garage. I got access to this garage for the weekend and I figured I'd take full advantage and try to knock out a ton of stuff on the E36 M3. I've been telling you guys for a while, I ordered a ton of parts and I'm going to take the opportunity this weekend to install all of them. This will be kind of a few different videos that I make, but this video specifically is a direct result of when I installed my chassis mount shifter a few videos ago. If you saw the title and thumbnail for this video, you're probably wondering what any of that has to do with my power steering system, but essentially, if you caught that video, you know that at the end, after I installed the actual shifter itself, I did install rev shift, transmission, and engine mounts. And in order to install engine mounts on these cars, you do have to either raise the engine or lower the front subframe. And I opted to raise the engine up. And unfortunately, in doing so, I ripped my power steering line apart. It leaked fluid everywhere and I no longer have power steering in the car. And so I went ahead and bought a whole power steering, I guess, service kit, pretty much everything in the power steering system minus the rack and the pump. And we're gonna be replacing all of that today. That is what this video is. I figured I'd make a how-to, kind of walk you guys through the process of how to replace all of those parts, show you what you need, the parts that I got, and kind of just go through the process of, you know, getting my car back to how it's supposed to be. So yeah, I do have to get the car in the air and I have to get the front splitter off again. So I'm not gonna bore you guys too much with that. You've seen it before. I've done it in a few different videos. I'm just gonna do it real quick and then we'll get started on going through and taking out what needs to come out so we can put these new parts in. Here we go. All right, so here we have Turner Motorsports Comprehensive Power Steering Kit. Like I was saying earlier, it comes with everything minus the power steering rack and power steering pump. As you can see, it comes with brand new banjo bolts, brand new washers, brand new hose clamps, a reservoir. That's your feed line. It connects from the reservoir to the pump. That's your high pressure line. It goes from the pump to the rack. And then this is your power steering cooler. It goes from the rack through your cooler and back to the reservoir via this line. I want to say I paid about $270 after shipping and taxes and such. And the reason I went with this kit versus kind of like an upgraded kit or something from another company is because I was doing some research and everyone was saying that this is sufficient enough for what I'm trying to do with the car. So I figured I'd save some money and just buy this versus trying to upgrade parts where I didn't feel it was necessary. Now, the reason I am doing this now versus later on, I do think that my power steering system did have a leak and I was going to have to address this at some point. But I had to do it sooner. I basically expedited that process because I split the line here. I split it apart and spilled all my power steering fluid. Like I said earlier, I did that when I was doing my engine mounts, and the reason for that happening basically is because this is bolted to the rack, which is bolted to the front subframe, and the bracket that holds the power steering reservoir in place essentially is bolted to the engine. And so when I bolted the engine mounts and raised the engine up, this stayed in place, but that raised up and it put tension on this part and basically ripped this line off. And so I lost all my fluid, I lost power steering fluid. And in case you were unaware, you don't want to drive your car too long like that, just because the fluid is what lubricates the pump and lubricates the inside of the rack. And I didn't want to risk causing any damage to any of those components, and so that's why I bought this and that's why we're replacing it today. So moving on to the engine bay real quick. As you can see, deep in there is my power steering reservoir. So as you can see, to get access to that, you are gonna wanna remove whatever you have right here. In my case, I gotta remove this ducting. If you have a stock air box, you're gonna wanna take that out. But I believe that's all you're gonna need, at least on top of the engine. Everything else is pretty much from the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove all of this ducting, and then when I get that out of the way, I'll start walking you guys through the process of what to take off underneath the car. Here we go. All right, as you can see, I have all of the ducting off and I have full access to the reservoir down here. Now, I was kind of messing with this a little bit already, and if you see right here, there's a little 10mm bolt that holds this bracket, or rather tightens the bracket around the reservoir. So I went ahead and loosened that a little bit, and you can kind of see that I'm able to kind of pull the reservoir out already. So you can see I can kind of shake it and like pull it out. It is still held on to the pump via the feed line. I haven't taken the bolt out of the feed line yet, but if you could see down there, sorry, my camera's having a hard time focusing. Yeah, there it is. So that is the high pressure line you're seeing, and then underneath that is the banjo bolt that holds the feed line to the reservoir. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that out. I believe it's a 21 millimeter. I didn't bring the right size socket this time, so I'm having to use a crescent wrench. But I'm gonna get that bolt out and then pull the reservoir out. And once it's out, I am gonna take the bracket out as well so I can clean it because it's covered in power steering fluid. But once I get that out and clean, I'll update you guys with what to do next. Oh, and really quick, I just realized too that this is gonna be able to probably come out this way because my line is ripped. The one I was telling you earlier, that line right there that ripped. Otherwise, that line, which is connected to the reservoir, would also be connected to your cooler. So there's a pretty good chance that if that is your case and yours isn't ripped, I mean, if you have all new parts, you could probably just cut that line and pull this reservoir out from the top. But if you don't want to do that, you might have to try to fight getting the bracket out completely and pulling it out from the bottom. But I just remember that. I wanted to let you guys know because, you know, obviously I have a unique circumstance where I'm going to be able to pull this out because my line is already ripped. All right, as you guys just saw, I got the bracket out. This is where it sits in the car. Once you have the reservoir out of the way, you have really good access to the two bolts that hold the entire bracket in the car. They're just two 13 millimeter bolts. As you can see, there's one that goes right there and one that goes over here. Along with cleaning the bracket and the bolts and stuff, I tried to clean this area as best as possible to kind of show you guys what's going on down here. So if you look straight down right there, so that is the 19 millimeter bolt or banjo bolt that goes to the high pressure line that runs up and around back here. And then that bolt down there is the one that I believe is a 21 millimeter, but that goes to the power steering cooler. And then the other end of this, if you follow this line around here, all the way back here, and then to down there, see if I can get it to focus for you guys. You can see the other 19 millimeter banjo bolt right there. So that's pretty easy to get to once you have the reservoir out of the way and the bracket. You can just kind of reach down there and get that off, and then you could reach this with a socket and a ratchet and you should be able to get the high pressure line out. I'm gonna go ahead and do that and also get the cooler off. I'll show you guys how to get the cooler off in a second once I get the high pressure line out. There's just two 10 millimeter bolts that hold it to the rack, but I'll show you when I get under there. All right, I'm on to the final step here of taking the cooler out. I already took the banjo bolt off of where it secures to the power steering rack, but I wanted to show you guys real quick where the two bolts are. Now it's going to be kind of hard to see because I have the sway bar right here. I will put a photo up with some arrows so you guys can have a better view of what it looks like. But over here on the right side of the cooler, you can kind of see right under here where my finger's at, there's going to be a 10 millimeter bolt right here, and then over on the left side, way over here, again, if you look at my finger, there's going to be a 10 millimeter bolt right here. And once you take both of those out and take the banjo bolt out, this should be free, and you should be able to take this thing out, clean it up, and then obviously install as the reverse. I'll talk you guys through that as I put mine back in the car. But yeah, pretty simple. I'm gonna go ahead and do this and then catch you guys when I start putting it back in the car. All right, everything is installed, but I did want to take a minute and tell you guys just kind of my experience putting it all back together. Obviously, the install is the exact reverse of taking it all apart, but in my particular experience this time, putting everything back together was quite a bit more challenging, just because if you remember back to the beginning of the video, I pulled the reservoir out with the two lines attached, and normally you can't do that because one of those lines is attached to the whole cooler assembly, that hard line that runs at the front of the power steering rack. And so when you put it all back in, you can't put it all back in that same way. What you end up having to do is put the reservoir in first, kind of put it in the clamp or the bracket that holds it in, and then from underneath the car you got to try to finesse the hoses onto the reservoir, and then finesse the hose clamps, and then tighten the hose clamps. And it's just not a lot of space to work down there, and you know, you end up getting all dirty and banging up your knuckles and stuff. But everything is installed on my car. I just put some fluid in it. I turned the steering wheel back and forth a few times. And then when I'm ready to start it, when I think I got the majority of the bubbles out, I'm gonna put everything back together, plug everything in, the intake, ducting and stuff. And then we'll see if we have power steering. So yeah, next clip will be me letting you guys know if this job was a success or not. Here we go. All right, the power steering system is all installed. All of the parts that I had purchased from that Turner Motorsport comprehensive power steering kit is installed. The car runs, it does not leak, and the power steering works. So we could definitely call this job done and a success. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of how-to DIY follow along. I kind of go back and forth between wanting to make these videos more or do just kind of, you know, do the install myself and then try to make the video kind of fun to watch. But you know, I wanted to make this video for anyone who's thinking about doing power steering work on your E36. Hopefully it was pretty black and white. I tried to make it as clear and concise as I could. But there is a reason why the car is still in the air and why it's not on the ground driving around, so I could really make sure that the power steering works. And that would have to do with what I said earlier in the video. Like I said, I have this garage for a few days and I wanted to take full advantage of this space so I can install a ton of parts that I have for the car. And so other than the power steering stuff that I installed in today's video, the next couple of videos, or maybe the next few videos depending on how I do it, will be solely having to do with the cooling system on this car. I've bought pretty much every single cooling system part you can for these cars, maybe minus the HVAC like heater valve or heater core valve, whatever it's called. But I have a new radiator, I have a new electric fan, water pump, thermostat, radiator hoses, O-rings, the hoses that go underneath the intake, pretty much everything you could think of. And that is what we're going to be doing in the next couple of videos. I think I want to do one video where I take everything out and kind of show you guys what I'm doing, show you guys the parts that I'm throwing in the car, and then maybe the next video will be installing it, bleeding the system, and driving it for the first time. But that is what we have on the agenda. That will be the next few videos going forward. So if you want to see that, if you want to follow along for that cooling system overhaul on this car, definitely one of the biggest downfalls of these cars. If you want to watch it, definitely consider subscribing and turning on post notifications. And if not, and you are only watching this video, hopefully you enjoyed it. I appreciate you checking it out as usual. Thank you for watching. Again, please subscribe, like, comment, you know, all of the things, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.